The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster by, good afternoon. Welcome to Manx Radio's Mannin Line. It's Monday lunchtime today. Today we're talking about how the Isle of Man makes its money and the department that helps the Isle of Man make its money. The department that brings business to the Isle of Man focuses on digital industries on the Isle of Man. Looks at Finance Isle of Man, Locate Isle of Man, and also Visit Isle of Man. It's the Department for Enterprise, and the Minister is here today, and the Chief Exec, Tim Johnston, is Minister, and Mark Lewin, Chief Exec. Faster Mai, good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Faster Mai. So, Tim Johnston, we just had TT. What's the department? Has it shaken down yet? Has the department had a chance to look at what TT 2023 was like, apart from the weather?
Well, that was a real star turn, wasn't it, Andy, at the end of the day? The weather was amazing. I think there's a process now of really assessing everything, obviously, looking at it, but I think we can all hopefully agree that it was a really fantastic event, very successful, a lot of great feedback, and like you said, the weather really, really made it, and overall very successful indeed.
Now, the motorsport section, if you like, the department comes within Enterprise. Which bit of Enterprise does motorsport come under?
Well, really, it sits on its own. Really, as it's such an important factor, and we have a political representative who Tim Crookall, who's responsible for motorsport, and there's a whole team dedicated to that agency, and of course, they're already now starting to plan for next year. Such a huge event, and it's such a global event. I think sometimes we underestimate just how big that event is now.
Mark Lewin, will you have a hand in looking at this? Will you be considering overall how the TT went, or do you leave it to motorsport?
Absolutely involved, and the motorsport team work closely with Visit in terms of ultimately the reason we put that on is to attract and support visitors from throughout the world. And as the Minister says, there's already a significant amount of debrief going across the whole aspect of the organisation and those involved, but also that planning into next year. So absolutely keen to take some feedback. As the Minister said, there's lots of really good things that came out this year, and particularly that reach. But as always, there are probably some areas that we need to listen and look at going forward, both for the Grand Prix and then into next year's TT as well.
What about the new format? When was that first mooted?
So it's been talked about for a while, and I think the pandemic gave an opportunity really to step back and do some of this strategic thinking. The kind of, if I lift it up and go back to why, every year around a third of our audience are visitors that come to the island are new, and we know we have to work hard to reach new audiences. We have to be able to sustain the event. We know that when we do have issues around weather or the other incidents, there can be a real challenge in terms of it's a significant ask on so many people, and you have really long days. We want to try and minimise that and make it more sustainable, so shorter days are a part of that feature. But the other aspect is the island becomes really busy over that peak, and the peak historically has been that Friday, Saturday, Sunday and into the Monday. We can't realistically take more people during that period, but we have a fantastic offering at the beginning, we have a fantastic offering at the end, and the slight change in the schedule by starting a little bit later and moving into that second weekend principally was also designed to help try and encourage people to come towards the end, and in doing so over time get a number of thousand more visitors to come in that end period. We know people are taking shorter breaks, less so still the idea of taking 2 or 3 weeks, that's a big ask. So position it in that way had a number of specific benefits in terms of reducing the impact on people, but also in terms of trying to attract more people through that period.
I mean, sometimes the two words Manx and change don't often go well together. So could you see that that some people weren't going to be happy with the change into the format?
I think the TT, so many people again are involved and give up so much for it. Everything we do whenever we change things has some level of feedback. So there was always going to be some challenge around that. I hope again by explaining it and looking at the results this year, we've definitely seen both from the steam packet and from the airlines, a level of increased uptake in terms of visitor numbers towards the end. And yes, the weather played a really important part, but the race days themselves were slightly less. So we never take for granted the impact on residents, and this is really impactful around the whole island. So we have to find that right balance.
Tim Johnston?
Absolutely, and I think we have to remember, as I said before, it's such a huge event, and it requires a huge amount of goodwill across the island for it to happen, and we're very grateful for that. And also that the huge number of volunteers that take part in this event. If it wasn't for the marshals, if it wasn't for the medical staff and all others involved, we wouldn't be able to run that. And it's really encouraging, for example, this year to see an increase again in marshals, people wanting to get involved, because again that's critical. If we don't have that, then we don't have a festival.
Is there any simple formula to say whether the TT makes money or costs the Isle of Man money, Tim Johnston?
I think when we look at the benefit to the overall economy, then it is absolutely a positive. It's really, really important for lots of businesses.
It's a lifeline for many businesses.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. We recognise that. But of course, there's no standing still. I think standing still is actually going backwards, and we've seen what's happened, for example, in Northern Ireland and the challenges. We recognise the fact that costs every year increase. We've seen that with insurance, for example, through health and safety. So it's really important that we are always looking ahead and having a commercial entity, really. And of course, that does great with some people, but the reality is if we don't move it forward, it's going to cost us more every year. That's just a fact. We have to make sure that we're making it work commercially. And for example, seeing the big increases in our subscription on our TT Plus are very positive. Big global audience, something like 65,000 people paid for the live coverage globally. Really positive. And these are the things that are going to help us to fund things going forward.
Okay, Nigel's with us now. Hi, Nigel. You're live with Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin from Enterprise.
Morning, gentlemen. Morning, Minister. Morning, Mark.
Good morning.
They both know my backgrounds. I've got Albany Tools, and obviously we've got Albany House. And I've just taken your comments on board greatly. And it was a great TT, but unfortunately the road I'm just about to go down, and I've got a two-part question, is the air traffic control situation at the airport. I lost £1,200 over TT with an EasyJet flight that didn't come in with 6 corporate guys on board, and lost the day on the Friday. And I know it's very difficult, but they flew in for the racing and the plane was totally cancelled. And I've had another number of other planes that have done exactly the same, and it's very frustrating when I've got a small little business and trying to run an operation throughout the summer period. So my point is, one of them is the compensation that I'm finding difficult to get, because I think it's going to be very difficult to turn around to my insurance broker and turn around to them and say, due to the fact that I'm probably going to be phoning you quite regularly over the next few months of lack of business, is that unfortunately Isle of Man and Ronaldsway Airport traffic control guys need to have a break at some sort. They're going to think I'm running some sort of Mickey Mouse operation here, which is obviously not the case. And I know about the break situation because my brother came over last Thursday. He was in Bristol. He was sat 50 minutes on the runway to be told by the captain, I quote, "The reason why we can't fly into the Isle of Man at the moment is because they are on their break and they go offline," which is pretty scary. And they've told us that they will come back online in approximately 20 minutes to obviously allow us to come into the Isle of Man, which, as I say, is very frustrating for me. And obviously, if there was other planes over the Isle of Man and there's nobody in the control room, that's pretty drastic altogether, but that's another issue altogether, probably. The second part to my question is, with this situation rolling on, I'm sure there would have been a build-up to air traffic control staff issues much before it's got to this level. I've been on the island 34 years. I've never known a situation like this where it's had to be closed every day for so many hours. It's pretty appalling, and we all know that. And the situation needs to be sorted, but it's the lack in the hospitality business. We've lost enough over the last few years. It's the lack of revenue that hotels and people like myself and the B&Bs are losing by people that can't rebook. EasyJet, quite rightly, will put them up on accommodation and put them up overnight, and obviously they get reimbursed through their travel people. But surely EasyJet, and you can quote me if I'm wrong here, will pass that payment back to the Isle of Man, because on these occasions when it's air traffic control's fault, it's not EasyJet's problem. They will obviously send Isle of Man Airport, which I presume is Isle of Man government, the invoice for the people that have had to have their accommodation looked after, and probably us as the taxpayers paying for that. So over that period, probably, Mark, I'd like to know throughout the summer of how much revenue is being lost, not only in accommodation, but their forward spend on the Isle of Man, restaurants, shopping, that people are not coming through the Isle of Man this summer due to the fact that we have this absolutely appalling condition down at the airport, and it should have never been allowed to happen.
Okay, Mark Lewin.
Hi, Nigel. Good afternoon. I think definitely we are hearing more and more concerns coming across the whole economy, and do recognise there's a real challenge down at the airport. There are a variety of reasons feeding into that. The air traffic control is one at the moment. We've had weather. Clearly today is another issue of that, and there's been issues, and you mentioned one airline, but there's issues in terms of across the UK and Europe and further afield. So there is a really complex situation here. It's not an area that Department for Enterprise directly is responsible for, but we do work closely with the Department of Infrastructure. We were meeting with them on Friday. There's further conversations this week, just in terms of looking to understand other things that we might be able to do in this space. In terms of when businesses lose out, and I know, Nigel, we've talked before, and you've lost out in the past over other things, that is a real disappointment, and we do recognise the impact that has on small businesses, and businesses particularly in the visitor space, where those visitors are just coming for a single purpose, and if they don't get here, then that opportunity's is gone. In terms of the compensation side of things, it's not an area, again, I'm fully familiar with, but as far as I'm aware, we don't pay. So if an aircraft is not able to make it into the Isle of Man, that's not something that we as an island necessarily pick up the cost for. But clearly the issue is, whether it be residents or visitors or leisure visitors or business visitors, we want to see those people coming here. We want to see them coming without that impact, and I know we'll continue those conversations to see if there are any other things we can do to try and help minimise that.
Okay, Tim Johnston.
Yes, good afternoon, Nigel, and obviously very frustrating to hear what you're saying, and very sympathetic, and it is a real level of concern at the moment, what's happening at the airport, and as you quite rightly say, the knock-on effect it's having on business. I think all I can say is, as Mark's alluded to, I know that the DOI are working very hard on this issue, and I think the ATC issue is an acute problem, and it has been accelerated by, and I know it's often used as an excuse, but I'm afraid it is the case with COVID. We saw quite a lot of, I think, retiring over that period, and the bottom line is it takes 3 or 4 years to train an ATC, and this is an issue, I think, globally at the moment, and there's a shortage, and we are struggling, and I'm aware that the DI Minister was on this programme a few weeks ago, along with the airport manager, explaining some of these situations, and that there is now a recruitment process in place. But I also understand, even if you bring a fully qualified ATC to the island, even if they could be fully qualified in Heathrow, but as soon as they come to a new airport, they have to train for several months, I think a year or more, before they can operate. So this is a real problem, and I know that's why they've set out a clear schedule of training. I think it's important to remember that the rules are so incredibly strict when it comes to the brakes for the ATCs. These are CAA regulations. I mean, the reason why air travel is the safest travel is because of these regulations and the dangers of fatigue. I liken it a little bit to sort of an HGV driver. You're not allowed to operate beyond those, and that is just a fact. So these are real challenges. The airport has set out a schedule of when these training sessions are going to be happening, when they're going to be open. But then if you overlay that, then delays for flights being delayed coming into the airport, which is really got, the airport's got no control over. Likes of EasyJet flights coming in very, very delayed, because they've picked up several delays over Europe through the day. I mean, an aircraft that arrives in the Isle of Man may well have already gone to the Mediterranean and come back again. If it picks up delays, they add on through the day. And other thing that's happening is, because again of Ukraine, a lot of the air traffic has been pushed further west into already very congested airspace over France and Holland, and that's made it very difficult. And then on top of that, you have things like the French, you like to strike every 5 minutes, and it just adds up and causes a real backlog of problems.
What did you say to the people who couldn't get here, Nigel?
Well, do you know something? I did a picnic on that day, so I'd not only had the loss of about 1,200 quid, but I had about £100 worth of picnic stuff in the back of the car. And the guys were so disappointed, they actually sent me £100 because I said, I can't take your money. Because normally I take a small deposit. I don't take full payment up front because I'm not that greedy. And then obviously completion of the tour, I actually then obviously get the payment. But they actually paid me just me money for my picnic just to cover my backside. But across the board, it's very frustrating for people like myself. And I totally agree what you said, but I totally think it's gone past the stage now. I think COVID's gone out the window. My wife's had COVID. I've had COVID. We're still running a successful bed and breakfast, and we're still operating. And I think it's time now, when yourself quite rightly wants to bring more visitors and more holidays to the Isle of Man. And I'm not asking you this personally directly at you, but the Isle of Man needs to get a grip and get something done about this, because I've seen the decline in the Isle of Man, and Andy, I've been on many a time, and situations like this, it's right in the middle of the summer now, and something needs to be acted, and it's been left too late, trade alert, yet again, and we need to act on it. So guys, please do something about it and pass it on to your man at the top, Mr. Cannon. He needs to get involved with this because it's going to get out of hand.
Okay, we appreciate that, Nigel. Thanks for calling us today. I want to go to Julian. You're live with Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin. Julian.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Tim and Mark.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hi. I'd just like to say a quick thank you to Daisy for her kind words on Friday's Mannin Line. Thanks, Daisy. My question is for either gentleman. How influential is the ESG, or Environmental, Social and Corporate Governance Credit Score, on Isle of Man government policies relating to enterprise sectors like agriculture, transport, education, manufacturing, and the promotion of the island further afield, especially considering that the Isle of Man government is registered at Sustainalytics, the ESG rating agency?
Mark?
So, certainly the whole gambit of ESG is very topical at the moment. If we look at the various different sectors that we work with, the different agencies, they all have initiatives in this space, looking at either sustainable finance, looking at our clean tech and green technologies, in the visitor perspective, looking at sustainable visitor policies, and in the digital world as well, looking at how we make sure that we continue to not only decarbonise our services sector but support the broader aims of that. In terms of specific credit scores and specific reporting and the kind of the whole regime around that, we know we have more to do. We've in our department plan this year, we've pulled out certainly the specific areas in terms of our own actions, which is physically as a department working with employees, but it's also about the policies we have, the advice we give to businesses, the initiatives that we have in this space to help people and help businesses on that journey towards a far more sustainable set of policies across the ESG broad spectrum.
Julian?
Following on from that, are you worried about any potential consequences of pursuing this good ESG score when you see in the news that ESG-embracing companies like Budweiser, Target, Starbucks, and closer to home, very recently, Wix, are facing massive public backlash and boycotts? And there are several senior academics at Harvard and Princeton who are warning of what they're calling a woke green bubble about to burst, which will trigger rapid disinvestment in ESG companies, leaving a trail of economic casualties. The current behaviour of some large businesses, corporations and governments has been likened to a murmuration of starlings, albeit now under some remote control from an unknown entity. Do you not think it might be time to pause and think about this ESG? Because even things that Nigel say and many other people say, it does seem that ESG seems to be the start of all the problems that we're having, because it's basically merit has been replaced with subjective non-financial factors. And we're seeing this across a lot of sectors, whether it be agriculture, transport, anything like this.
Well,
I can just relay what I said before, that across all areas of our economy, all sectors, and certainly the international facing businesses and most businesses, this is on their agenda. This is important to them. That's what their shareholders tell them. That's what their employees tell them. As to the specific elements of individual responses, absolutely we have to find the right balance through that and make sure we're doing things for the right reasons, not just for the sake of doing it. But ultimately this is all about taking the island, taking our economy in the right direction, which is globally understood to be the way forward.
Tim Johnston.
Yes, and I think it's important that as a department, as a government, we're constantly sort of taking the pulse as such as the global economy and direction of what's happening, and we certainly, quite rightly, should never be blinkered into one direction. But I think it's safe to say that the conversations we do have with business, with international businesses and businesses that want to invest on the island and wanting to create jobs for the future, then whether you agree with it or not, the ESG is incredibly important, and it is something that is attracting a lot of investment, and it would be wrong then for us as a department, as a government, to ignore that. But always be aware of broader picture. I accept, but again, government. You're always in that sort of difficult position, really. Of we haven't got a crystal ball, but certainly it is important. And if people who are wanting to invest in our island, wanting to create jobs, it's important that we understand and are part of that.
Okay, final word, Julian.
Yeah, but these ESG initiatives are from unelected entities all around the world. It's sort of like a one-size-fits-all, which I don't think is fitting for a small island like ours. That's the problem that I have with this, and we are seeing this with, Budweiser and Target have lost 28 billion. I think Budweiser Light's lost 25% of its share price just going on its last advertising campaign based on ESG targets and ESG scoring. So,
all right, we appreciate that, Julian. Thanks for calling today.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, good to hear from you. Actually, while we're on ESG, why, this is a question, why did we lose TT0? And bearing in mind that there's a current plan for banning internal combustion engines by 2030, what's the plan for the TT then? TT0, first of all, why did it go, Mark?
Certainly we paused it, and that was the statement.
And again, way ahead of its time, though, wasn't it?
It was, and it was increasingly difficult to sustain the level of interest from teams. We had one real manufacturer coming forward, plus the universities. We recognised the challenge of the TT and the mountain course is an extreme challenge, and we were seeing less and less participants coming to be able to put entries in.
So that's interesting, because the skeet is that everybody was interested in it, and the universities and manufacturers wanted to be part of it.
Certainly from where I saw things, that wasn't the case. It was a declining field. It's expensive for them, and the technology was changing all the time. The manufacturers are very interested in production and road, and we see that now coming to the fore, but putting them through that level of extreme environment, in a sense, it can improve the manufacturer, but it could also damage them. We also have the issue we talked before about the schedule, and fitting these in from an organisation perspective is difficult. So the commitment was to take a pause, to look at options. There are a range of new technologies coming through. You said it before about looking to the longer term, understanding what that future looks like in terms of motor racing. That's part of it, and we're still committed to talking to people in this space, talking to the universities, talking to the manufacturers, to look at what we can do in this space going forward.
Okay, and Tim Johnston, if internal combustion engines are going by 2030, where will that leave TT?
Well, I think obviously to say the technology is changing all the time. I think that we will have to monitor that one and see how that develops. Obviously, alongside that, of course, we're seeing the element of green fuels. We're seeing combustion engines probably continuing in some form or other. So I think it's an area we'll keep an eye on. Okay,
Alison, you're live with Mark Lewin and Tim Johnston, MHK.
Hi, good afternoon, gentlemen. Just a couple of points and a couple of questions on the back of those. Now, everybody knows that travelling to and from the Isle of Man is horrendously expensive, especially over TT. But can you answer me a question? I had some friends come over a car plus 2 passengers. They came over partway through practice week and returned to the UK on Wednesday last week, so after TT, and they paid just over £850 return. I mean, is that acceptable?
I certainly hear the question in terms of what is acceptable, and getting to the island, particularly over that period. We recognise it costs from a fan perspective, a visitor perspective, and indeed our own residents that travel, and they are peak times, those are peak costs. So when I said before, we took a pause over the pandemic, we asked a lot of questions, we had a lot of focus groups. Cost of getting to the event was definitely an issue. We have to balance that with recognising that these are private entities in this space, in terms of whether it be the airlines or in your case in terms of the steam packet operating as a commercial entity at arm's length from government, and provides much needed income to reinvest in that company and the vessels throughout the rest of the year. So it is one, we know that there are concerns in that space. We have to watch it carefully. I think this year was also compounded because essentially, having not had the TT for 2 years, that we saw that inflationary roll up for people that had paid in 2019. Their tickets were then rolled forward to last year, so to a large extent they were insulated from that cost rise. So certainly for this year, again, some of the feedback we've had is there seemed to be a price increase, and that was the case. So we don't we are conscious of, we can't be complacent in that space, and that's back to even things like changing the schedule around to try and encourage more people to come at the less busier times. They're still busy, but less busier is part of trying to find that balance.
At least it's our steam packet, though. At least that any profits going back to the Isle of Man, Alison.
Yeah, that doesn't help for people coming here for holiday, though. Paying £850. They can go abroad probably on an all-inclusive for £850, and it just gets a little bit embarrassing. I'm Manx through and through. I'm a great supporter of the TT. I would hate to see it go. I live inside the course. My choice. I don't moan about it. But I think the government are shooting themselves in the foot by extortionate travel prices. I know you can't do anything about the airline prices. That's another story. But yes, you can do something about the steam packet prices. And for somebody coming over with a motorbike, one person and a motorbike return, £350. I think that's terrible, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to be told that by a visitor, I also think that although the government have moved on with technology, I think they've shot themselves in the foot with the live broadcast of the TT. There's no way that there was as many people or motorbikes over this year as previous.
In whereabouts?
Whereabouts what?
Whereabouts, no, I mean, were you looking around the entire course?
The roads have not been as busy.
Okay.
And the campsites have not been so busy.
Okay. Mark Lewin?
So certainly I use the word a lot in terms of finding that balance, but the early indications are that there's been a change for a number of years where there have been slightly less bikes each time. Broadly speaking, when we look at the actual number of visitors that came over on the likes of the steam packet with bikes, yes, they're slightly down, but overall passengers look like they're up, and also air passengers look like they're up as well. So in terms of visitors, we think this year, the Minister said before, broadly, we've seen an increase this year.
So fewer bikes and more visitors?
Slightly, but you've also got an increase in things like vans. So, partly changing nature of habits, but also potentially people putting motorbikes in the back of vans. That's a number we don't measure, but there's clearly lots of anecdotes of people doing that, which we understand.
I know that the government can't really do an awful lot about the prices that airlines charge, but I can just give you one example. I had a family member come over, and he was going to go back on, was it Sunday the 11th, from Isle of Man to Gatwick. It was a good job he didn't, because I think they were cancelled anyway that day. But the one-way Isle of Man Gatwick was £550.
Good grief.
So he actually travelled back on the Saturday.
OK, Alison, we appreciate that. We've heard what you've had to say. Thanks for calling today.
OK, bye.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. Well, we're with the Minister in charge and the Chief Exec of the department that regulates and looks at Business Isle of Man, Digital Isle of Man, Finance Isle of Man, Locate Isle of Man and Visit Isle of Man. There's lots we haven't even talked about, like the e-gaming industry and also bringing business to the Isle of Man and exactly how you get people to come here and set up a business.
There's a new way to Subway with 2 fantastic menus. Which will you go for? The all-new Subway series with 15 irresistible creations like the Big Bombay Sub, Great Goddess Salad, Emperor Wrap and Big Cheesesteak Sub Melt. Or create your own. You pick the ingredients you want and build your own sub, salad or wrap the way you want it. There's a great mix of healthy and indulgent menu items available from Subway and ShopRite, Peel and Port Erin.
If you're an excellent team player with the ability to work with paid and volunteer staff and love to be hands-on, St John Ambulance is recruiting for a commercial training manager. The successful candidate will work closely with the customer, St John trainers and students and will plan the training calendar, manage trainer allocation and deliver courses when required. If you have a recognised trainer and assessor qualification and would like more information including a full job description, then email ceo@sja.org.im.
You can get the best of everything, and the price is just as nice. Oh, I'm so glad we went to Pacesetter. The perfect shower, some great tiles, all the accessories we needed. They had it all. Amazing ranges from traditional to modern, many exclusive to Pacesetter. Get your bathroom on song. Visit the Pacesetter showrooms at Harris Terrace and Spring Valley.
You can get the best of everything, where the price is twice as nice.
Nearly as good as me.
Every drop is precious. Water. So easy to take it for granted, isn't it? Our reservoirs supply the needs of our island, but with the effects of climate change, that's becoming more challenging every year. Manx water is the only water we have, so we need to make every drop count by using it wisely, at home, in the garden and in general. Visit manxutilities.im to find out how you can begin smarter living, to lower energy bills and reduce your impact on our island environment.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Tim Johnston, MHK, is with us. Aaron Michael, MHK, the Minister at Department for Enterprise. Mark Lewin, Chief Exec of the Department for Enterprise. Mark Lewin, we used to have loads of films and television shows being shot here. I mean, you simply couldn't move at one time for road closed because they were shooting something somewhere. What went wrong? What's happened to that now?
I don't think it's necessarily gone wrong, but it's definitely changed. So a number of years ago, probably 8 to 10 years ago now, the policy that Isle of Man government as a whole had in terms of investing in these productions changed, and that was the thing that brought the films here. We physically invested taxpayers' money into the entities,
and there was a VAT
there was
a VAT advantage, wasn't there?
Absolutely, and that changed. So that conscious decision no longer to do that. Essentially, those productions ceased. We do have interest all the time, so we have a variety of things, and it's quite topical at the moment. We go back to TT, we had a lot of interest from around various different areas of the world that we're really interested in seeing it firsthand, and we'll continue to look to see how we can support those, but not in the way that we used to.
I mean, the vast majority of people would have looked at Maryland and wouldn't have known the difference. Everybody on the Isle of Man groaned because it was the thing set on the Isle of Man, and everybody knew full well it was the Isle of Wight or it was Ireland. I know there was some bad PR over Pinewood, and there was an MHK who made a lot of noise about it. But is there any chance that could possibly come back, because stuff seems to be made elsewhere?
I think one of the things the Department for Enterprise always does is look at ideas, look at suggestions and initiatives, and this comes around regularly. I say we can provide a level of support. We can do logistics. We have some great talent on the island still. We have some great locations, so we have some attractiveness, and we can look at small levels of financial support. We just at the moment can't compete with the likes of the UK and Ireland that put substantial direct taxpayers' money into these productions, but it's on the agenda regularly to look at.
But I mean, we did make money, didn't we, from the films, Tim Johnston? We did. We certainly made a profit on the Pinewood investment, I believe.
A bit before my time, Andy, but I believe so. Yes, I think there have been in the past, absolutely. And as I say, but the market's changed. I think the landscape's changed quite a lot, really. And wouldn't like to comment much further on that one, really.
Okay, let's go back to the lines now, and Juan's with us. Hi, Juan.
Afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Tim. Afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Juan.
Yeah, I'm just following on a little bit from what Julian was talking about, and my thing has always been of what direction the government seemed to be taking us, and the major civil servants who were underneath. And that seemed to be a little bit clearer from what you're saying there to Julian. I just wanted to ask one direct question. It's not a racist question, it's just a question and an observation. After being away from the island for quite a few months, I've noticed in the last 12 months a large amount of Afro-Caribbean or black people or persons of colour, whatever the non-offensive name is these days, being integrated into the society here. So I'm just asking the question, and again, this is not racist in any way or form. I'm just asking the question of, is this part of the ESG initiative that you're having to follow? Because I tend to see that there's a lot of bullying going on with the ESG rollout. Or is this a tailor-made initiative from the government?
Okay, Mark Lewin?
Absolutely, we have no conscious bias in terms of demographics. I think we are very fortunate in that we have a wide range of businesses across our economy that themselves have interests on a global basis, and we see people moving here from all around the world, from all different backgrounds, and from a locate perspective and from an island perspective, we are attractive to people throughout the world. So I think as a consequence of us having economic success with businesses that have those global reach, we will expect and we would welcome people from all backgrounds and from all sorts of different demographics. That's just the nature of economic growth.
Okay, Tim Johnston?
I think this is clearly an economic decision. I think we recognise through obviously our own plan and the economic strategy the need to grow our working age population. That's very clear, and that's something that the department is very much involved in, growing our economy. The department doesn't create jobs, but we create the environment where jobs are created, and that close work we do with our agencies across that area is really, really important. So and through Locate, which is obviously through looking globally now for talent and skills, because we have, I think, the lowest unemployment, some of the lowest unemployment rates ever on the island at the moment, and we have a lot of job vacancies. So we are looking further and further afield for the talent and the skills that we need for our economy.
Okay, Juan?
It's kind of answered the question, kind of not. There's obviously been a push in a certain area of the world to get that many people here in one go. I understand we've had a big Filipino community here, which was needed for nursing. So the question I was asking was pointed as to, was there an initiative to a certain part of the world to bring them people over? And I get everything else that you're saying. That was just the pointed question. Was there an initiative, a directive to go to a certain part of the world, and is there been a push from the ESGs? Like I said, if you look at the other side, and Julian's quite right to awaken anyone up who's not awake to it, when you look at the likes of Larry Fink and BlackRock and these people who are very, very much behind the power of ESG and where this is heading, it's kind of a bit worrying from the other side looking in. So I do think that the government need to be on their toes and look at where this is heading and where this could take the Isle of Man. We've been very groundbreaking in years gone past. I don't think we should be following other people's initiatives, but we should be tailor-made to what's going to make the Isle of Man work.
Okay, all right, Julian, thanks for that. And now Ian's with us now. Hi, Ian.
Oh, good afternoon, gentlemen. Andy. A quick question, basically. What's happening with Google Earth? I ask the question because most people I know, if they're thinking of locating to somewhere new, one of the first things they do when they inquire about properties is go on Google Earth to see what the place looks like. I bought a house here in Peel, a moved house, 10 years ago. It's still not built according to Google Earth. That means looking around the island, that anything's been built in the last 10 years isn't visible to potential relocators. That must surely be a very simple thing to address.
Okay, Mark Lewin?
It's a new one on me, that. It's not come up as a comment recently. It's something I will take away and just see if we got any influence in terms of when the last time Google came over with its cars and mapped the island and did some aerial footage. So I'll certainly take that away. What I would say is through the department's Locate platform, we get a lot of global interest. We had a lot of interest over TT, but more generally reaching out, and there's a lot of content in there about how people can find places to live and more information. So I hope it's not just Google Earth people are looking at. I think there's a broader, richer set of things that we can do to help them. But I will take it away and just see if there's anything we can do in that space.
Okay, thanks, Ian.
Well, can I just ask the follow-up on that?
Okay, by all means.
Surely the Manx government must have overhead footage of the island, either aerial shots or drone surveys or something. If Google won't provide it, surely the government's continually lauding its digital effectiveness could do it themselves.
Okay. Did we pay for Google Earth to come over last time?
No, it's a private company. They go around the world on a frequency based on based on the audience they think are looking at things. So I say we'll take it away. We do have a lot of information in government from mapping and aerial. It's probably not in the right format that Google can just pick it up and use it. But and I say some of that's already available in our Locate. But I will take it away.
Okay. That's great. Thanks, Ian. That's the Google thing is the little car that goes around with the spinning cameras on top, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're live with Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin from Department for Enterprise.
The Isle of Man Electoral Commission would like to hear from you. Share your experience of being a voter in the Isle of Man, any barriers you have discovered, or any concerns you have about elections or constituency boundaries will help inform the Commission's work. A public meeting will be held on Tuesday the 20th of June at Arbury Parish Hall, Ballabeg, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You can also complete an online public consultation by visiting consult.gov.im. Don't miss out on this opportunity to get your voice heard.
We all like to live in the moment. Impromptu drinks, long evenings down Kirkmichael, family barbecues.
Who fancies a dip?
Me! We like to keep our options open, but the trick to keeping your options open is actually a bit of forward planning too. Why not make a plan with your very own HSBC Relationship Manager? Talk to us about financial planning. HSBC, opening up a world of opportunity.
Investment involves risk. The amount initially invested may not be received back. HSBC Bank PLC Isle of Man branch is regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority. Visit the HSBC website for terms and eligibility requirements.
This July, it's time to go the full Monty. The funniest, most revealing musical of all time. The classic tale of downtrodden steelworkers letting it all hang out comes to the Gaiety Theatre. It's full of humour. It's full of heart. It's full of, well, the full Monty, 15th to the 22nd July. VillaGaiety.com or 600 Travel 5. Sponsored by Zedra and supported by your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Howard's live with us now. Hi, Howard.
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, gentlemen. That chap has just been on about Google Earth. Just to confirm what he was saying, outside our house parked is a car that I sold 12 years ago. And according to Google Earth, it's still parked outside my house. I don't think it's even on the island now. But that beside the point, that's just given some sort of idea since Google's been updated, etc. So it's worthwhile having a look because people, as this gentleman said, quite rightly will scan Google Earth, and people will scan Google Earth not necessarily to move here, but to view the place, and it's given a totally wrong impression. But speaking of impressions, I viewed last night, and now this is going to be a cringe effect on the Minister for Enterprise, Charles Gard's second video, Welcome Back to the Isle of Man. And the first video was descriptive of all the various areas that were, well, shall we say, lack of attention by government services. And the follow-up one shows that some areas have been improved, but others are still in a very derelict state, not just private places, but government. What is the government hanging on for when the planning will allow a beautiful house that's in a conservation area to be demolished, yet just not a quarter of a mile, less than half a mile away, there are greenfield sites owned by the government who are supposed to be selling them or going to build on them, yet they're allowing perfectly good houses to be demolished, Victorian houses, plus a lot of the work that should have been done has not been done, and that's in over a year.
Okay, Tim Johnston.
Well, thanks, Howard. I'm not going to comment on that specific property, I think, but I think generally, if we go back to the election, one thing that came very clearly was the feeling, as you say, that there's things that and areas that just look very run down on the island, and areas that I think we've all just got used to seeing, and actually it's not acceptable. And I think that video highlights some of that, and some have been addressed, but there's no doubt there's an awful lot more to do. And I think from a Department of Enterprise point of view, and again from the election, a feeling that we need to do something about those sites. And one of the earliest things the government did in this new administration was look to form the Manx Development Corporation. So looking at those government-owned sites in and around the island, and saying, what can we do with them, and making sure that we're prioritising those sites. Again, they're brownfield. Let's avoid developing on greenfield where we can. There's lots of embedded carbon in these sites. Let's make sure that we're doing things properly, and that is certainly something that's been rolled out at the moment, and we've seen, for example, the redevelopment started on the old nurses' home in Douglas, and there's further work at Westminster Road at the moment going on. So I think that's recognising that we have to do something about those sites. Now, alongside that, also we know there are a lot of privately owned sites as well, and again that's sat empty for a long time. So again, looking at what we can do, understand why these sites are empty, why they've been left, and having conversations with the owners of those sites. And again, we've seen the development of a new scheme, the Island Infrastructure Scheme, to sort of work in partnership with people who own these sites to try and make sure that we're bringing them back to life for the benefit for all of us, for the economy, and making sure that we get a benefit from that, exchequer benefit and jobs. So. The government very, very, very aware of these challenges, and I think is making sure we are trying to do something about that.
Okay.
Just coming back to that, you're saying the private enterprise. A lot of these places, like Circular Road and various places like that, they've had buildings demolished, and then they become an unofficial car park. These places should be developed first and foremost, and if not, they should have a full business rate put on them, because these companies are operating a business in parking lots while that particular piece of land increases in price, which they don't have to do anything with it, only put some loose gravel down and park cars on it, and they have a nice income from a scruffy piece of land, and it should be built on and made the town, or city as they call it these days, City of Douglas. Ramsey's the same, and all over, where they just knock these places down and leave them. There should be a forceful means to make these people develop them.
Okay, all right. Howard, I'm going to leave it there because somebody else wants to talk about planning, but thanks for that point today. David, you're live with Tim Johnston and Mark Lewin.
Hi, Andy and team there. Can I just ask the question directly to both of you, really? I know one's a civil servant, so we've got to be careful there. We have in our possession, or the government in custodianship there, is two pubs. That's the QB and the one down there, I forgot what, Park Road School.
The Bowling Green.
The Bowling Green pub there. We have other things like the prison site, Summerland site, the bus station, and I think it was Mr. Johnston that we've handed that over to the Development Council. Now, the Development Council won't come on the radio and ask questions, or hasn't been. They've been invited. So how can we have faith in, and what is your department actually doing to encourage these developers to actually finish their projects. And I'll give you an excitement that the Newsom site down in the Quay, blocked in planning. What are you doing to help them out? What are you doing to help the Golf Link site down at down Castletown Way?
Okay, so does Manx Development Corporation come under Enterprise, Mark Lewin?
We work very closely with them. They are a commercial entity. Treasury is the shareholder, but effectively we work really hand in hand with them in terms of their ideas. So there's some of the sites that David you mentioned, some of the old prison site, Park Road. They have been part of that conversation to see, and the Minister said before, look at what could be done. This isn't just about development for development's sake. It has to be something that's viable commercially. It has to have a level of return for the taxpayers, and it has to be something we want. So there is that element. In terms of broader planning, I just want to also say we work with DEFA and with other areas of government on the Built Environment Reform Programme, which is a long phrase, but essentially says we recognise there's improvements that need to be made in the broader planning space that particularly support building out these environments in our brownfield, in our towns, in our city, ahead of greenfield sites. So there's a lot of work that's going on. Sometimes they take some time to come to the surface, but it is a very live topic, and we work closely with others on it.
Tim Johnston. So the public appreciate action in terms of building on places like Park Road School or what have you. Can we expect any announcements soon?
Well, I think it's a case of looking at all these particular sites one by one, looking and assessing them, and that's certainly what's going on at the moment, Andy. And I'm confident that we're going to see, some real change in our landscapes over the years to come. Okay,
thanks for being with us today, Tim Johnston, MHK, and Mark Lewin. We got through about 10% of the questions, so will he come back soon?
Happy to.
Okay, thanks for being with us today. We've been talking about Enterprise, the Department for Enterprise, including Business Isle of Man, Digital Isle of Man, Finance, Visit and Locate. And we're back with an open line tomorrow on Mannin Line. Stick around, Christy D is on the way. And thanks to Howie Kane on the phones today.
WINT